If you're familiar with the 1999 science fiction thriller The Matrix, you understand the red pill. You take the red pill and you discover what true reality is, that you live in an artificial construct, a matrix. And this is the way Americans live. They live in an artificial construct. They live in a reality set up for them by the United Nations in cooperation with the U.S. federal government. We live in the non-reality. It's a non-reality because our major media outlets don't tell us reality. They tell us about the story of the day, the conflict of the moment, and usually they run to press before they get all their facts, and half the time they wind up giving you a false impression of what's going on, or because they have a bit of an agenda in their own mind, they screw up the facts. That's why we live in an artificial reality. That's why we live in a matrix. So what is this stealth jihad? Well, it's also cultural jihad. When the Poles, the Italians, the Germans, the Jews came to this country, they had a Western society. They believed in separation of church and state. They basically had a rather similar culture. They had, their own particular cuisine. They had their languages, but their culture was largely very similar. So assimilating into American culture was not that big a deal. These days, the government doesn't talk about assimilation anymore. They talk about integration. That means they're going to place enclaves of people that are completely different from Americans and have no intention of assimilating into areas and communities, and then they teach them how to navigate the American system, but they never teach them to assimilate. And worse, in mosque, the imams teach their people to never assimilate because it's contrary to Islam. So how does this integration work? Let's take a look at the list. The first thing they do is establish a conclave. This is done through government refugee placement, and the placement is actually done by non-profit civilian agencies, most of them religious, like Catholic Charities, the Episcopals, some evangelicals, some fundamentalists involved in that. And they establish a conclave, a group of foreign nationals living in a community like Dearborn, Michigan, and Atlanta, Georgia, and quite a number of other places. This is done by official government help. Once they're there, they grow the population. Muslims will outpopulate everyone else. Now, that doesn't mean they outpopulate whites or Americans so much as it means that they outpopulate the affluent and the wealthy, which virtually all Americans are affluent and fairly wealthy compared to Middle Eastern countries, compared to developing nations in Africa and Asia. So once you have all of those in place, you develop a sense of unity, community. So they establish a mosque as their community centers. These are much more than religious institutions. They are community centers. So the mosque becomes the center of the enclave and a growing population. Once they get that far, then they can do one more thing. They can start claiming victim status because they're a minority. Yeah, well, in minorities in this country, they don't have equal rights. They have extra special rights. They get placement in colleges, universities, and workplaces disproportionate to their proportion in the society. That's called special rights. Victims have special rights in America. So what happens after you have special rights? Well, once you have special rights, you can start resisting authority and local customs because you have special victim status now. And you can resist the authority and come up with your own rules and your own way of doing things and get away with it. Once you resist, you can start coming up with your own lawyers and start exploiting victim laws, exploiting local laws, exploiting zoning laws, getting zoning changed so you can do more things in your area than your neighbors can, your neighbors in the other part of the community. So they exploit that, they ignore local customs, and away you go. You've got a little Egypt, you've got a little Yemen, you've got a little Syria, you've got a little Iraq in your community. You don't really have a unified, homogeneous, learn how to talk yet, homogeneous community. You have side-by-side communities. They are not assimilated. They are not truly even integrated. Once you have established that, then you can establish your own laws, called Sharia law. And you can be governed by Sharia law and local tribunals in your mosque instead of being governed by local courts and local police, and they'll resist the police. They say they're their own police, which they don't, and at which point they get away with honor killings, female genital mutilations. They get away with beating women, and rape, and slavery is literally built right into Islam. It is part of the culture, it's part of their religion, their culture, exactly the same thing. Once they get to a point where they can control everything themselves, then they want to completely secede from society. They want to completely separate. They virtually want to be their own little nation state in these communities. They want to convert the entire town to a nation state. And that's what has been happening in France and in England. There are no-go zones. And, you know, the local authorities, they like to deny they exist, but the police will tell you they absolutely do exist. There are places local police can't go. This is starting to happen in the United States as well. So what happens after that? Well, you just take over the political system. Muslims get elected to mayorships, city council, House of Representatives, Senate, governorships. And once you do that, the Christian ethic, the Judean ethic is right out the window. Once it's right out the window, you don't have the basis of your country anymore. The Constitution has been completely subverted for Sharia law. The Bill of Rights doesn't matter. Free speech is pointless. Property rights, pointless. Human dignity, pointless. It's a cultural jihad, and it's coming to a city near you. So either stand up to it and live free, or bow down like the media does and the government does and become slaves to Islam, because that's exactly what they want out of you. So live free or be a slave. It's your choice.